Hello there, Salim Omar here from the eCommerce Money Map podcast. I've got a special guest for us. His name is Ben Leonard. Ben, welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate you taking the time to be here. Ben's best known as the founder of Beast Gear. He is the classic millennial entrepreneur. He built a business on a laptop in a cupboard in his spare time. The difference? Ben grew an international seven-figure business and successfully exited after 3 years. The business Holy Grail. Now Ben is doing it all over again and helping others do the same with his e-commerce consultancy, benleonard.pro, and e-commerce brokerage, ecombrokers.co.uk. Ben, welcome, and let's dive right in because I'm super excited to pick your brain on several things. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your backstory.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me on. And my backstory is a little bit different than many people in e-commerce. So I live in Northeast Scotland in a city called Aberdeen, which is the oil and gas city of Europe. And that industry has been strong here since the 1970s. And like many, many people, I ended up working in that industry. But I was coming at from a slightly different angle. I am an ecologist originally. So I was the tree hugger in the room, or actually dolphin hugger, who had to tell the oil guys they couldn't throw chemicals in the sea. And I enjoyed my job. But I got sick in early 2016. It's the third time actually that I had this heart condition. And this time they really needed to take it seriously to make sure it didn't become really chronic. So I was signed off work. I had to stop all my fitness hobbies while I recovered. I'm glad to say I am recovered. And whilst I was recovering, I had this idea of something that would keep me in touch with my fitness hobbies, even though I couldn't do them. You see, the fitness gear I was using wasn't good enough, and I didn't feel like the service of the companies was good enough, and I felt like I could do a better job. So I started this fitness brand as a hobby, really. My wife was busy studying at the time, so she encouraged me to do it. And it turned out I was quite good at that. And so what started as a hobby that might earn me some pocket money and really was just something to keep me occupied turned into a full-time job. And 3 years later, we were doing $6 million and I sold the business.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So really, the next question I have for you, Ben, is how did you scale the company, the brand from zero? You started it, right? And
Yep.
took it to 6 million, and like you were an ecologist, right? So nothing against that, but you didn't have any business experience, right?
Yeah, no business experience, no product development experience, no marketing experience. But what I did have, which put me at an advantage to maybe another person with no experience, is a scientific background. And in science, we have a hypothesis, we test it, we see what happens, we analyze the data, and then we change something and try again. So I used that approach. So it wasn't completely sort of haphazardly guessing my way through. I was making informed decisions based on sensible tests and data so that I didn't waste time, resources, money on things before I knew that they were going to work. So I started small. The first product that I developed was a jump rope called the Beast Rope. Well, first of all, I developed the product I found myself an excellent manufacturing partner. I tested different prototypes and tweaked the prototypes, tested it with athletes that I knew. So I knew I had a great product. And then I placed a low risk bet of £2,500, which was at the time was probably something like $4,000. And some of that money was loaned to me by my parents after I explained to them what I was trying to do. And I basically placed a bet. And the bet was I bet 500 people will want one of these. And I ordered 500 of them. And then I scaled the business by plowing as much of the profits as I could back into it all the time, taking these relatively low risk steps each time. And then the first order I placed for that particular product was 500 units. And the last order I placed for that product before I sold the business was for 250,000 units. So the scale was crazy, but my scientific background really helped me.
What does that mean, Ben, when you say scientific background? Were you looking at the data and were you
Yeah.
driving the business using data?
There was a lot of data. So for instance, one of the main sales channels for my e-commerce business was Amazon. We sold on our own website as well, but Amazon was a key sales channel. And what's really important is Amazon, in Amazon to get right, for instance, is your PPC, your pay-per-click advertising. And when you are running your pay-per-click advertising, you rely on data to tell you which keywords you're bidding on are converting and which are not. And you use that data to decide how much you're going to bid for that keyword. It's a keyword auction. So that's one example of using data. Other examples would be looking at my website and seeing how well it's converting, changing something on my website, like improving the layout or the copy, for instance, or changing pricing, and analyzing how that affects my conversion rate, for instance. But then there was also just the general principles of science, testing, retesting, and seeing what the results are. So for instance, when I was developing products, I would develop a prototype, test it on myself, my friends, but also professional athletes that I formed partnerships with, getting their feedback, consolidating that, analyzing it, and based on that, making a change or not to the product. So a lot of it was data and a lot of it was just sound principles.
Yeah, amazing. Good stuff, man. Now, I'm sure, having talked to so many e-commerce business owners and business owners in many other industries as well, the lessons learned when one gets into business, what were the lessons, and maybe some were really hard lessons that you learned along the way?
Sure. There were a lot of lessons, and we can't talk about all of them, but there's one that really sticks in my mind, which is to do with intellectual property. And now that I'm helping people sell businesses, I'm always telling them to double down on this. Right from the get-go of when you even have your idea, is start getting trademarks, design registrations, and patents around your intellectual property. So let me give you an example. And people, you can actually, we can do a live case study on this, right? If people go to ipo.gov.uk, that's the UK Intellectual Property Office. And if you search for Beast Gear, you'll find some trademarks from 2016. And I registered those myself. I paid like £200 to register them. And I was really smug after I did that. I was like, man, I just saved myself a ton of money by registering these by myself. It only cost me a couple of £100. And then about a year later, I had a conversation with an intellectual property attorney. And it became clear to me that I had made a big mistake because by not working with an expert, the actual depth of protection that those trademarks gave me was really shallow. I hadn't done a good enough job. They were protecting only the thinnest scope possible of what I really needed. So if you look on the same website, ipo.gov.uk, and search Beast Gear, you'll see identical trademarks registered a year later. But when you dig into the trademark and look at all the different classes and descriptions that that trademark protects me for, it's much, much broader because I worked with an expert. Now imagine I hadn't done that and someone else had come along, registered Beast Gear or started selling Beast Gear products in only a slightly different class, I would not have been able to shut them down. But because thankfully I got away with it for a year, basically, right? I made a mistake. I got away with it for a year. So that's the big lesson that I always teach people is get your intellectual property in order. And then later on, I was able to fight back because I designed one of my products completely from scratch myself. I had patents around it and I was able to fight back when other people tried to rip off my product. So that's the big one.
Yeah. That's great insight there. Now, why should business owners think like Sonic the Hedgehog?
Yeah, I really like this example. So Sonic the Hedgehog, many of us will remember playing that back in the day. He has to jump through all the rings, right? And the more rings he gets, the more points he gets. Well, let's call these rings hoops, right? And many times as business owners and entrepreneurs, we see a hoop we have to jump through in the road. And we think, oh, here we go. Something else I have to do. Isn't there an easier way? Can't I just turn back on the path that I was going down and just go back? Or maybe I can kind of navigate around this hoop. Well, that is often the easy and the lazy option. But you will find that if you go to the effort to jump through the hoop, you will emerge on the other side with a huge opportunity. because most of your competitors can't be bothered to go through all the effort of jumping through the hoop. Let me give you an example. I basically doubled my sales overnight by jumping through a hoop. I was selling my products in the UK on my website and on Amazon. And at this time, 2017, the UK was still in the EU. We'd voted to leave the EU, but we hadn't left the EU. And so Amazon had this program where if I registered for it, they would distribute my products right across Europe for me and reach a whole bunch more customers. But it was a total pain to sign up for, especially at that time. I had to have all these documents completed and submitted and translated, but only by specific authorized translators for the tax authorities of all these countries. In fact, to qualify for Spain, I even had to have a document stamped with like a medieval wax seal. And there's only like one person in my city that does it. It was a complete pain and very few people did it, but I did it. And after doing it, I basically doubled my sales because all of a sudden my products were available to people right across Europe and my competitors hadn't done it. It's kind of like, imagine you're like a caveman leading your tribe through over this treacherous path over the mountain. But when you do it, you emerge into this rich, lush valley full of fruit and resources and vegetables and plants and animals. And all the other tribes don't have access to it because you've gone to the effort to do it. That's what it's like. So that's why you should be like Sonic the Hedgehog and jump through hoops.
Great. Yeah. So you started a successful brand. In a few years, you exited out. Was that a tough decision for you to exit out?
It was and it wasn't. It was a very head versus heart thing. So it was early 2016. And my wife was pregnant. We wanted to move house. And I became aware that I was sitting on a very valuable asset, but I wasn't really able to pull a bunch of money out of that asset, that brand, for us day to day. But if I was to sell it, I would make a big amount of money that would give us a safety net for life. And there was a fair bit of risk tied up in the business. We were heavily reliant on one particular sales channel. And I was at a crossroads. I could either continue to grow the business, which would mean probably hiring a larger team and a significant amount more work for me. And I was already running around like a headless chicken, if I'm being honest. Or I could sell the business and still get some of the upside by putting together an agreement that would give me an earnout based on how well the business performed after we sold it. And it was the right thing for my family at the time. I'd reached that romantic point where the business had a lot of potential to go really, really well, stratospheric, but at the same time, it might not. And so there was a lot of value in the business and it was right for us at the time.
Did you have the next chapter of your life figured out when you made the decision to exit out?
No, not entirely. After I sold the business, which I made the decision to just think about selling in early 2019. I sold it in late 2019. After I sold it, I even flirted with the idea for about 5 minutes of going back to my old job. But I realized I realized that I'd uncovered an entrepreneurial spark and a passion for entrepreneurship. And I wanted to pursue that in a few ways. I wanted to build more brands again. I wanted to help other people sell their business successfully because the broker that I used was frankly terrible. Luckily, my accountant saved the day and we got the deal done. And that's why she and I then set up our brokerage firm to help others. And I wanted to kind of teach other people that it doesn't matter if they have no business experience. If they have an idea, they can make a success of it. And so after, maybe a couple of months of downtime and rejuvenating a bit, I got to work on my new projects.
Got it. Yeah. And, so why and how should someone exit? Like, should they consider exiting even if they're not? Should they be? Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I think the answer to that is you should consider exiting the day that you have the idea of your business. Because if you build a business that is sellable and in a state that is attractive to a potential buyer, the happy side effect is it is so much easier to run. It will scale bigger more quickly. And when you do decide one day to sell, which probably you will if you have an e-commerce business, e-commerce is an environment that is constantly evolving. It is tiring and a bit of a headache to constantly keep up with it. And there has to be an end game. You can't keep doing this forever. So if you build your business with an exit in mind from the start, the day you do decide to sell, it will be that much easier for you to do so. And it will be significantly more valuable. And the way to do that is to work with a professional firm who will help you plan and then execute your exit strategy, maximize the value of the business, present it to the right buyers, and then negotiate the right deal for you.
Yeah. Makes sense. Cool. This is amazing. Really appreciating the insights you're sharing with us, the wisdom.
Sure.
Is there a question, Ben, I should have asked you that I didn't?
A question you should have asked me that you didn't is probably, what is the number one mistake people make when they're building their e-commerce business? Which I can tell you the answer to is that
hear it.
Yeah, they put together a business which does not have a discernible brand identity. Rather than having a brand, they just have a mishmash of stuff that they're selling on a website and perhaps on marketplaces like Amazon, Walmart, Etsy. And the problem there is that with no discernible brand identity, that is not a very attractive asset that somebody's going to want to buy, right? Brand is right at the base of, we have this thing called the value pyramid, which is all the things a potential buyer wants to see in a business they want to buy. And right at the base of that, we have brand. And the reason for that is that without brand, you don't have any hook, no excitement, no loyalty, no repeat custom, no longevity or sustainability. And buyers want that. They want the intellectual property that comes with it. They want the legion of fans that love your brand and they get excited and will buy every product that you launch. If you just have online accounts selling random stuff, that's not attractive to a buyer because anyone could just copy that. There's no IP, there's no moat around it. There's nothing that protects it or gives it any sustainability or longevity. And some people listening will say, yeah, but Ben, I'm already doing really good numbers and I don't really have a strong brand identity. In which case I say, well, that's good. Well done. I'm glad your numbers are good. You've probably entered e-commerce a bit earlier at a time where it was easier to do something without a strong brand identity, but nobody is going to want to buy your business, or rather somebody might want to buy your business, but not pay that much for it without a strong brand identity. And here's why that matters. We see this often. We will sell a business, two very similar businesses doing basically the same numbers. And the one with the strong brand identity will sell for a higher multiple, which means you'll get more money for it. Now, not only does that matter now, but that matters in the future. Because if you sell your business for 7 figures, first of all, that's a lot of money. But what are you going to do with that? Well, most people are going to put a significant proportion of that into probably a low, medium risk stocks and shares portfolio. And that's going to grow and compound year on year on year. So we had a couple of businesses relatively recently. They were both doing just under $500,000 in profit. We sold one of them for over 5x and one of them for just over 3x. The one that we sold for over 5x multiple was the one with the strong brand. The weak brand sold for the lower multiple. In the end, there was about $1 million difference in the selling prices for those businesses, which is $1 million now. Well, what's that going to be after 5 years? Maybe $1.5 million. What's it going to be when it compounds out for 10 years? Maybe more than, $2.5 million. So it really matters, and people should pay attention to that.
Yeah, love that. Great advice. Ben, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Sure. They can head over to ecombrokers.co.uk, and it's a UK domain, but we're working all over the world. We have a deal director in North America, in Chicago. We're doing deals in North America, UK, Europe, Middle East, Australia, New Zealand. You can email me, ben@ecombrokers.co.uk. I'm on all the main social media channels at Ben Leonard Pro, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great. We're going to have all that in our show notes as well. Thank you so much, Ben. This was incredible. Appreciate you.
Cool. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.